Today, we're diving into a powerful and honestly, a pretty different way to think about leadership, all through the eyes of the legendary W. Edwards Deming. But first, let's start with a question that I'm pretty sure we've all asked ourselves. You see this amazing ad, right? A company promises incredible service, a revolutionary product, but then you actually use them. And the experience is, well, the total opposite. Why does that happen so much? And it's not just a small annoyance, it's a huge problem. A lot of the time it's because the marketing folks and the management folks are basically living on different planets. Marketing creates this beautiful vision of what the company could be, but the actual system of how the company runs is designed to do something completely different. Maybe like cutting every possible cost instead of actually improving the customer experience. It creates this massive, frustrating gap. So here's our game plan. We're going to start by digging into that promise versus reality problem. Then we'll introduce Deming's 4 big ideas, his 4 pillars. We'll talk about seeing the whole system, understanding people, and learning the right way. And it all leads to a totally new way to think about leadership.
Okay, so this is really the heart of the issue. Disconnected systems. Just picture this. A sales team gets huge bonuses for selling new features, but they're selling features the engineering team hasn't even started building yet. When the different parts of a company aren't talking to each other, you just get chaos and frustration for everybody.
So how in the world do you fix a problem that big? Well, this is where W. Edwards Deming comes in. He created this incredible framework he called the system of profound knowledge. Sounds pretty intense, right? But it's really just a way of seeing the deep connections that make an organization actually work. And this image right here, it is the perfect metaphor for what he was talking about. A business isn't just a collection of arms and legs and departments. It's an integrated system, just like the human body. Everything has to work together in harmony to achieve one single goal. So, his whole system is built on these 4 interconnected pillars. You've got an appreciation of a system, knowledge of variation, a theory of knowledge, and an understanding of psychology. Think of them like 4 different lenses. When you look through all of them at once, you get a completely new and much clearer picture of your company. Let's break them down. All right, first up, appreciation of a system. This is the bedrock of everything. It means you stop seeing your company as a bunch of boxes on an org chart and start seeing it for what it is, a network of processes and people all flowing toward a common goal. And this idea leads to Deming's most famous and probably most controversial claim. He said that a whopping 95% of a company's performance comes from the system, not the individual people in it. Just think about that. It totally flips the script from blaming people for problems to looking at the process itself. Deming had a great analogy for this. He talked about an orchestra. If the only goal was for each person to play as loudly as possible, you just get a bunch of noise. But to make beautiful music, you need coordination, cooperation, you need a leader. It's the same in a business. Making one department super efficient can actually wreck things for the whole company if it's not in sync with everyone else. And this isn't just a theory. Check out this amazing real-world example. F. Kenneth Iverson at Nucor Steel. While all the other steel companies had these fancy executive suites, Iverson ran the whole company from a tiny office in a strip mall. Why? Because he knew the real power. The true leverage point in his system was the steelworkers on the floor. So he treated them like gold, gave them real power, and paid them well. And the result? They became the most productive steelworkers on the planet. That focus on people is the perfect segue to the next pillar, an understanding of psychology. It's about finally admitting that people aren't just cogs in a machine. We all have these powerful built-in motivators, like taking pride in what we do. So with that in mind, let's talk about something almost every company does, something that often flies right in the face of understanding psychology. Yeah, I'm talking about the annual performance review. Deming argued that these reviews, while they sound good on paper, but in reality, they often cause way more harm than good. They can kill teamwork by making everyone compete against each other. They create fear. And worst of all, they encourage this who-based approach to problems, where the first question is always, who can we blame, instead of what part of the system is broken. So if you buy into this, a leader's job description totally changes. You're not a judge anymore. You're a coach. Your job is to get obstacles out of people's way, to build trust, and to help people find real joy and pride in their work. This leads us right into the last 2 pillars, and they're really 2 sides of the same coin.
They're all about how companies can actually learn and get better, and it means swapping out assumptions and gut feelings for a more scientific way of doing things. The key tool here is something called the learning cycle. And what's really cool is seeing how this idea evolved. It actually started way back in 1939 with a guy named Walter Shewhart. Deming took it to Japan in the 50s, and eventually he refined it into what he insisted on calling the PDSA cycle. PDSA is super simple but incredibly powerful. It stands for plan, do, study, act. You plan a test based on a theory you have. You do it, but on a small scale. Then you study the results to see what really happened. And finally, you act on what you just learned. Deming was adamant about using the word study instead of check because studying means you're actually learning something new, not just ticking a box. And here is a fantastic, kind of wild example of PDSA in action. Jim McIngvale, better known as Mattress Mac, had a theory. He thought that sales commissions were actually hurting his business because they made his salespeople compete with each other instead of helping the customer. So he ran a test. He got rid of commissions entirely and just paid everyone a good salary. The result? His team's closing rate shot up from less than 50% to over 60%. Why? Because they started working together. This brings us to the final pillar, knowledge of variation. Imagine a sales manager who's obsessed with the daily sales numbers. One day sales are up and he's celebrating. The next day they're down and he's demanding to know what went wrong. Deming called this tampering because you're reacting to random noise. Once this manager learned about variation, he stopped freaking out about the daily ups and downs and instead focused on improving the sales system for everybody. And guess what? Overall sales for the whole team went up and stayed up. So when you take all four of these pillars, appreciation of a system, understanding psychology, theory of knowledge, and knowledge of variation, and you put them all together, you don't just get a few new tips. You get a fundamentally different and way more effective way to lead. It really just boils down to this one massive shift. The old way of managing is always looking for a person to blame. Deming's way is always looking for a part of the system to improve. It's a move away from fear and control and toward coaching, teamwork, and always learning. And so I'll leave you with this final thought. The next time you run into one of those stubborn, unfixable problems at work, just stop and ask yourself, is this really a people problem? Or is it a system that's just waiting for someone like you to finally understand it and make it better?